Okay, so I want to tell you the truth about learning Python in 2024. There's lots of people out there that still think that learning Python is the best way for you to make money, to build a great life, and make that sweet tech money. But is that still the case today? Well, let's talk about that. So for the longest time, Python has been the most dominant programming language out there. But coding in general is changing in many ways. We've got the AI revolution, we've got layoffs, we've got a changing market. So what does this all mean for you if you're learning Python or if you're thinking of learning Python? Should you still learn it? Should you learn something else? Or should you just give up and not do anything? So in this video, I'm going to give you a very objective assessment of the state of Python in the current industry, but I'm also going to give you something else. I'm going to give you the real truth when it comes to learning programming languages in general today, because what worked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago is not necessarily going to work anymore today because things are very different. But to really understand that, we need to go back a bit and understand why is Python so popular in the first place as a programming language. So Python was created in 1991. And the thing, guys, is that back in the day, programming was not what it is today. Popular languages at the time included languages like C, C++, or Java. And if anyone has ever coded in one of these languages, you'll know that it's a bit of a different experience than coding in Python. Writing some code, like this code right here, to open up a file in C is like freaking 20 lines of code. Whereas the same thing in Python is just one line of code or 2 lines of code. I remember when I was first learning programming using this course called CS50, and they would first teach you C. And I was like wondering, okay, why are we learning this obscure C language? But I realized it once after the fact, they also taught us Python. And the whole point was that now that we had done all of this stuff in C and learned just how pedantic programming can be with one of these older languages, it really made me appreciate just how much Python sort of hides behind the scenes, and it allows you to do the same things that would take a ton of lines of code with these other languages in just a couple of lines of code, because that is the whole thing that Python was made to do. It was made to make programming easy and accessible, and it was made to make code read almost like English. And this led to a self-reinforcing cycle where precisely because Python was so popular, it became even more popular because the popularity made it so that there are more Python developers out there than developers in other languages, which in turn incentivized companies to use Python over other languages because they had access to a much wider developer pool. So with that said, Python certainly has a lot going for it. In many industries like data science, AI, backend development, most of the tools that we use today are based in Python because Python is very optimized to do these types of things well. But if there's anything we know about the tech world, it is that things change fast, and things are certainly changing. So here are a couple of trends that are affecting Python today. And after that, we'll get into the real truth about learning programming that I was alluding to earlier. So to understand it, let's look at where Python is actually used. And mainly when you think of Python, you want to think about data and you want to think about backend. So think of anything sort of infrastructure based or any programming that sort of happens behind the scenes. A lot of AI, machine learning, like sort of the logic of all of that is going to be more Python based. So in turn, whatever is affecting this like sort of backend data industry is going to affect Python. And the first big trend is of course the AI revolution. Unless you've been living under an absolute rock for the past year, you'll know that AI is a very, very hot thing nowadays. Every startup that is getting funding now seems to have something to do with AI. Like everyone wants to use AI tools and things like this. And this might seem like it's a very positive trend for Python programmers, because if Python is used in AI and AI is becoming more popular, then that's great, right? But don't be so fast, because a lot of the AI stuff that is happening today is less about new companies coding up new AI from scratch. It's a lot more about people using these existing AI tools like ChatGPT and building stuff on top of them. So finding out new ways to use ChatGPT, to use them for different purposes, rather than coding up these LLMs from scratch. So while the rise of AI is probably going to be a very positive thing for Python demand, I wouldn't expect it to have nearly as much of an impact as you might expect in the surface. So that is a big thing to keep in mind. But the second big trend sounds a lot more boring, but could be even more important, is something called big data. So what is big data and why is this important? So if you imagine, for example, the entire data set of all the data about everyone's purchasing patterns on Amazon, or the entire data sets of all the conversations that are happening on Twitter. So all of this data is very massive and very messy in the real world. But with proper data analysis techniques, what these companies that have access to this data can do and are actively doing every single day is drawing insights from it that are very useful and very profitable. Because if you can imagine, like, for example, at what times do people usually buy diapers, for example, you as Amazon can better recommend these products to the right people. So why is this relevant for us? Well, it just so happens like that just with AI, Python is the main programming language used for this type of data analysis. So this is less talked about, but it could even have a bigger impact than AI itself on a Python demand. These are just some trends to keep in mind for the future. So if you're worried that Python is going to become like less relevant or something like that, I would say that if anything is going to stay just as relevant as it is now, but most likely become even relevant going forward. And also, if you just look at actual objective job data today, there's this guy who scraped like 14 million job postings, and he found that behind JavaScript, Python is still by far the second most popular programming language in terms of actual job openings. So that is the truth with Python compared to other programming languages today. It is absolutely still dominant, and I am very, very bullish on Python going forward. But let me give you the real truth about learning any programming language, because the sort of meta discussion here that most people often miss is that if you want to learn to code and actually get a job with it, actually make money with it, actually build a great career with it, it's not going to be enough to just learn one programming language and then just like code up something simple and woohoo, now you're a programmer and now someone's going to hire you. Like, it takes a lot more than this today, because the bigger effect of the trend of AI and of this is less about how it affects the relative popularity of different programming languages. What it does is that it makes coding in general much easier than it was before. And it makes it so that just like when we went from coding in assembly or C to coding in Python or JavaScript, which are much farther to code, one programmer could now do the job of like 5 programmers from before. The same is sort of happening now, which means that going forward, the real trend is that if you really want to be a successful developer today, AI is sort of democratizing programming. It's making the sort of minute details of remembering how to use filter or map or all these like details much less important, because anyone can just get these at any time from AI. So it's really highlighting is that being a developer today is much more about knowing how to solve problems with code. It's much more about having the right character trait to be the type of developer that these companies actually look for, and who's able to make the right decisions about what code to write rather than what code to not write. So that is the real truth about becoming a Python developer today. You need to understand how you can not just have the skills, but actually sell the skills, sell yourself to this company so that they can see that you are the developer that they are looking for. Now, this might sound scary, but it's actually a lot easier to execute than you might think, because most people out there don't even know how to do the basics. Like, most resumes that I look at are so bad that if you just do a couple of the basics right, you'll automatically stand out above like 95% of people. And I know this might sound overwhelming, so you can just go out and take these steps and go and apply them yourself. But if you're more serious and you actually are serious about making this happen today in 2024, then I made a program. It's called Python Developer Bootcamp, that is specifically designed to take you through all of these steps. It's going to include all the information that I really wish I had when I started learning programming myself, because there's so many things that people just don't talk about. Like, how do you build the right resume? How do you apply for jobs in the right way? Now, the program is not cheap. If you can't afford it or something, like, that's completely fine. You don't have to learn it by this program. You can also just go onto the landing page below and look at the curriculum and copy it and go find the resources on your own to learn it. It's just going to take you a bit more time. But if you are interested in, you can go and check it out below and use the code Python in all capitals, get 20% off the full program. What I also recommend you do is you start thinking about what projects do you want to build with your Python skills, rather than just thinking about what you're going to learn next about Python, because that is really what matters. So what you can do next is go watch this video where we go through 5 impressive Python resume projects that you can build instantly, even if you're still a beginner. And we go through what actually makes for a great resume project, so you can continue from this by watching this video right now. I'll see you there.